Cropping images and then resizing them, it's not anything new. In fact, Photoshop was first released in 1990 and the iconic Photoshop CS2 was released in 2005. But editing those images one by one can be incredibly slow. So what if you can do it programmatically? Well, you can. Let's use Cloudinary to cut that time that we would otherwise spend cropping and resizing images manually and save it for stuff that actually matters. So let's imagine you have a gallery of headshots that you need to crop and fit to a specific size because you don't want the full raw image being displayed and loaded to your users. For example, if I was to take a look at one of these images, the full image is shown here, 3000 by 4499. That's a large image. So how can we make this work? Well, why don't we use the Cloudinary helper within our PHP class to make these look a little better. You can see here that some of the images are not even the same size. So we want all of the images to be cropped to the same size, and then we can even scale them down. Just a note that we did make a video on further optimization techniques that you can find here. But first of all, since we have this image source, why don't we start with cropping the image to a size that we need. We're going to use the Cloudinary transformation resize helper. So this is a Livewire Volt component. You can think of it like a controller that we're passing this information into the view that you can see down here. So since we have this Cloudinary helper instantiated, why don't we start by transforming the images that we're already grabbing and pushing into the view? So we have the images that we're paginating through. And why don't we just go ahead and say that we want to make a collection of these images. So we'll say we'll get the collection of those images and we'll go ahead and start by transforming them. And this is where we can transform the image with that Cloudinary helper. So why don't we start by getting the path of the image, and that's actually in our database as the Cloudinary image ID. So we'll say that this is the Cloudinary, and we'll say that this is the image, and we need the image Cloudinary ID. Since Cloudinary needs the ID of the image that is uploaded to Cloudinary, that is stored in my database as the Cloudinary ID. Why don't we go ahead and start by resizing this? So we can use the resize scale helper. And what this can do is when we set a width and a height, it's going to scale down the image to that particular width and height. Now, Cloudinary does provide a helper component to do this automatically, but this is showing how it can be done within PHP if you are using this outside of a Blade component, for example. So we want to scale maybe the width and height to, let's say, 200. That sounds good. And then we just want to push this to a new URL. Since we're pushing this into the images variable here, we need it set as a URL. And then we'll go ahead and return that image, and we should be good to go. Now you can see here that when we scaled it, it's pushing the image, it's squishing it a little bit. So how can we fix this? Well, you can see here that we are actually now showing the image in the height and width that we want. And you can see here that the intrinsic size is now 200 by 200, but we're actually displaying, just because of the CSS that I'm using, we're displaying at a much higher size. So how can we fix this? Well, why don't we just go ahead and scale it to maybe 400 by 400 so it doesn't look so blurry and pixelated. Okay, that looks a little good, but it's still squished. So how can we make this a little better? Well, we can start by resizing to fit. Okay. Well, now the image is fit into the container and it's still a smaller size image, but not necessarily what we wanted. Well, we could do fill. And now the image is filling the space that we designated, width of 400 and a height of 400. Well, how can we make this even better? You can see here that some of the heads get cut off at a little weird angle, and this doesn't look exactly the way that we would want it to be shown. It's definitely getting there. Well, Cloudinary has a ton of different ways to crop and scale that you can see here. Resize modes as well as cropping modes. But the one that we're going to dial into is the thumb mode, which is really interesting. So what we can do is we're going to resize with thumbnail of width of 400, height of 400. And then we can set the gravity, which is essentially saying where should this image start to crop into that thumbnail. And we can set that to auto. That's looking a little better. We're grabbing the center of the images, but these are looking a little bit too close. So what can we do with this? Well, again, Cloudinary provides some great helpers where we can actually scale this back. We can zoom out, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So when we grab that height and we set that gravity to auto, we can say, we'll go ahead and zoom, and we can zoom out to 0.75 maybe. Okay, that's looking a little better. Maybe 0.60. Great. I am liking how that is looking. You can see here that we're still displaying, we're still rendering a 400 by 400 pixel image. Of course, because I have the developer tools open, you're seeing a smaller image. That's the one that we're sending to the browser. Much smaller, much cleaner, much easier, and with just a few lines of code before those images get pushed into our view. Next up, why don't you take a look at how you can start by uploading images to Cloudinary with Laravel.